The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
Tripling union membership in the United States. Yes, it can happen, and what it would mean to the average worker. Meanwhile, workers at 3 national parks join the National Treasury Employees Union. And today on the show, the president of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. Welcome to the Monday, July 27th edition of America's Workforce, where we are available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Matt Biggs will be our featured guest on the show today. Matt is president of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, about 90,000 strong. IFPTE.org is a website. He was first elected to that position back in 2021, then reelected in 2024. Great guy, also a sponsor here on America's Workforce. And you know by now that this administration has not been friendly to those in the federal workforce, and he's going to talk about their efforts to procure the bipartisan language in the House National Defense Authorization Act that repeals the first union-busting order as it pertains to the hundreds of thousands of unionized workers employed by the Department of Defense. And again, we hear national security. Oh, because of national security, you can't have a collective bargaining agreement. Well, you know where that is. Speaker Mike Johnson, right now, not really moving forward with this legislation. He'll speak to that. We're also going to talk about the so-called SAVE Act, which Trump would like to move forward. However, there's not enough votes. And also, we're going to talk about organizing. Matt was at the convention for the AFL-CIO, and it was announced back then, and we've talked about this on the show, that in the next 5 years, the Federation would like to see at least 2 million more workers join unions, okay? And Matt's doing just that. They just organized a fisheries unit in Hawaii, and he's going to talk about that. IFPTE.org for more information. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. Speaking of organizing, you got to check out the latest report from the Economic Policy Institute. The new report is making the case for tripling U.S. union membership from its current rate to roughly 10%, back to 30% levels seen in the 1950s. I believe it was as high as 35% around 1953, 1954. The report found that tripling union density would deliver a 14.5% raise, about $7,700 annually, or nearly $270,000 over a 35-year career for the medium worker. It would shift $1.2 trillion a year to workers, reverse a third of the rise in inequality since 1979, and narrow racial wage gaps by more than a third. The report attributes declining union density, which fell from over 30% in the 1950s to 22% by the 80s, 10% in 2025. All this to corporate union busting and anti-union legislation, noting that worker productivity, well, that has grown 2.7 times faster than wages going back to 1979. Robert Reich was a former labor secretary, and he wrote in the report's foreword, By making it harder and harder for workers to organize and bargain collectively, the rich seize more and more income and wealth, therefore destroying the U.S. middle class. The report proposes a roadmap to rebuild union power, including passing the Protecting the Right to Organize Act and the Public Servants Freedom to Negotiate Act, guaranteeing annual cost of living adjustments for newly unionized workers, requiring collective bargaining at companies where CEO to worker pay ratios exceed 100 to 1, and replacing right-to-work laws. It's a heck of a report, and you can download it at epi.org. In fact, one of the authors will be on the show in the next couple of weeks. Meanwhile, workers at Grand Canyon, Grand Teton, and Rocky Mountain National Parks have voted to unionize, part of the 317 employees who recently joined the National Treasury Employees Union in an election in June. The new chapter will cover roughly 650 workers. That includes rangers, scientists, and staff across 12 park sites and offices in several Mountain West states. Interim Officer Perry Sassnet, who works at Glacier National Park in Montana, said organizing momentum grew last year amid federal workforce cuts, noting unionized workers seemed better protected as colleagues lost long-held careers. Last year, workers at Yosemite, Sequoia, and Kings Canyon joined the National Federation of Federal Employees, and Death Valley National Park staff will soon hold their own union vote. Sassnet said the new chapter will push for fair treatment, pay, and benefits, but described the broader goal as protecting workers' ability to do their jobs and care for the parks that drew them to the work. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Matt Biggs, president of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, will be our next guest. Don't go away. You're listening to America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at IFPTE.org.
America's Workforce Radio is sponsored in part by the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 6, representing painters, glazers, drywall finishers, and sign and display industry workers. They remind you that belonging to a union is your right as an American.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Farrens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. We have seen a horrendous, and I mean a horrendous attack on federal workers, union workers representing by various federal unions, and we're featuring one on the show right now. That is the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, IFPTE.org. They, along with several unions, have gone to court to stop the madness. Matt Biggs, welcome back to America's Workforce. Thanks for joining us today. Let's start right there. 90,000 strong, I might add, members in the U.S. as well as Canada. Why don't you get into this language here involving the House National Defense Authorization Act that basically repeals. And I got to do a shout out here to a good union guy. We need more union members in Congress, and Don Norcross is one of them, longtime union member, IBEW out of New Jersey. And this legislation would repeal the first union busting order that came out of this administration. Matt, welcome back to the show. How are we doing today, brother?
Yeah. Hey, Flash. Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate your show. Kudos on the great success of your show and your continued support for labor and for IFPT in particular. Yeah, Don Norcross, Congressman Norcross, for the second year in a row has successfully added bipartisan language. He's championed the language, but he rounds up Republican support on the House Armed Services Committee to get language attached to the House Defense Authorization Act, a must-pass bill, to repeal the first Trump union-busting executive order that eliminated collective bargaining rights for over 1 million federal employees. And, you know, since it's on the Defense Authorization Act, the language only applies to workers, federal employees that work for the Department of Defense. But it's the biggest government agency, employs 770,000 federal employees, and we have a huge impact on starting to erode the union busting that's coming from this administration.
Let's get into that, because what I'm hearing, I'm sure you're hearing the same thing, that this is all about two words: national security. Somehow they figure unions and national security don't go together.
Yeah, what a joke that is. This is actually going to hurt national security. One of the things, particularly in the DoD, that's the most effective of providing results and for our nation's security, is the partnerships that have been established over decades between unions and management. And this is particularly effective, like I said, in the Department of Defense. I mean, IFPTE, our most effective partnership, labor management partnership, has been with NAVSEA. We represent the workers at all 4 Navy shipyards. And, you know, it's only the greatest Navy the world's ever seen, the United States Navy. And you know, our jobs is to get these ships out to sea and do it on time and under budget. And that's what our people do. And we do it in collaboration, working with very productively with the shipyard management and with the management at the national level here in DC at NAVSEA. And it's proven effective, like I say, for decades. So the idea that they're going to point to national security and claim that, you know, these workers are national security in nature is ridiculous. It's contrary to our national security. It's doing harm to our national security.
So, Matt, what about this legislation? It does have bipartisan support. How much support does it have as we speak?
Oh, it's got significant support. If you remember the Protect America's Workforce Act, that bill that went through the House, it had to go through on with a discharge petition, meaning it had to get Republicans to sign the discharge petition in order to get to the House floor. This is the same kind of thing. If it were offered as an amendment on the House floor, it would pass, even though the House is run by Republicans. We have a significant amount of Republican support, and kudos to those Republicans that have stepped up, particularly Congressman Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, great labor supporter. There's an amendment pending. You know, the NDAA, it may be considered this week. They've been trying to do it for several weeks, but it is on the schedule this week. We'll see if it gets to the House floor. It's all tied up in the SAVE Act. That's a long story. But But there's an amendment pending by Congressman Onder from Missouri to strip out the Norcross language. If his amendment is actually considered on the House floor to strip that language out, I'm very confident that it will be defeated. So I think we can preserve that language in the House bill. The Senate bill, unfortunately, doesn't have that language. So when they go to reconcile the two bills, put the two bills together, we really need to fight for the Norcross language to be included in the final product.
Matt, let me ask you this. Do you find more members of Congress, primarily on the conservative side, who are now speaking up because this administration has been very vocal about coming down on unions? Let's be honest about that, especially the federal unions. I'm just wondering, with the situation and with the economy, with gas prices, affordability right now, are they saying, well, wait a minute, maybe I should break away from that and support the unions once again? What are you hearing?
You know, it's the core group of Republicans that have always supported labor, that continue to support labor. You know, and there is a difference, Flash, as you probably know. I mean, some members of Congress, they're okay with private sector unions, and we have private sector members, and we appreciate that support. But when it comes to government unions, they're okay with crushing unions. I am heartened to see that we do have a core, solid group of Republicans, particularly in the House, not so much in the Senate, but particularly in the House, that are willing to stand up and vote with labor and with the federal employees. And you know, some of them they'll vote with us when it's parochial to their district, right? So we'll take advantage of that and all that stuff. But guys like Fitzpatrick and Chris Smith, you know, folks like that have always been with us. And, you know, those folks, quite frankly, we endorse them and we support them when they run for Congress because they support us.
Yeah. I remember that name come up on the show, Brian Fitzpatrick. He was also a co-sponsor of some legislation with Don Norcross when it comes to helping out the trades and pre-apprenticeship programs. And, you know, Norcross comes from the trades. It comes from the IBEW. So, I mean, he gets it. Obviously, we need more people to get it. You mentioned the SAVE Act. Let's get into that, because from what I'm reading, this is kind of scary. And there's a lot of states already that have pretty much encompassed what the SAVE Act is all about. Is this a non-starter or what? And maybe you could explain to our listeners what the SAVE Act is.
Yeah, I mean, the SAVE Act, you know, if you listen to President Trump's speech the other night, he makes it sound like it's a simple, you know, you have to show your ID when you show up at the voter to show up to vote on voting day. And he makes it sound like it's as simple as that. But really the intention of the SAVE Act, which is why President Trump wants it so much, is to prevent millions and millions and millions of people from voting. And it's a drastic and radical change to the way states do their voting processes. Now, in the Constitution, it's very clear the voting is handled by the states, not the federal government. But this president, through the SAVE Act, wants to implement draconian policies like forcing states to hand over their voting rolls to the federal government so you know, quite frankly, so the Trump administration can purge those rolls and take people off the voter rolls. It forces people to show up in person to register to vote, and they have to show a passport or a birth certificate in order just to register to vote. I mean, it's outrageous. Whereas, you know, people now in many states, you can just register to vote online. It should be as easy as possible. And they claim that, you know, this president and his supporters claim that there's voter fraud, and that's why we need the SAVE Act. Well, that's absolutely ridiculous. There's not voter fraud. If there is voter fraud, there's very little of it. I mean, in Georgia, for example, 8.2 million people voted in Georgia. There were only 20 instances where non-citizens registered to vote, and of those 29 voted. And all of those folks were referred for prosecution, by the way, all 20. When you juxtapose that to the impact of this SAVE Act, which will throw millions of people off their voter rolls, that's the intent of the legislation. And it will impact disproportionately lower income voters. For example, I think I saw a stat that said like 1 in 4 Americans with high school diplomas or less, only 1 in 4 have a passport, right? So if you think about that, here's the other thing, Flash. I renewed my passport recently. I went online to renew my freaking passport.
Yeah.
You can go online to renew your passport, but you can't go online to register to vote. Something's wrong there. Something's wrong.
Is this legislation in search of a problem, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's in search of a problem, and in search of trying to prevent the Democrats from taking control of Congress in the next election. The other thing is, even it's not going to get enacted. They're trying to find every way to enact it. They're trying to attach it to the budget reconciliation. They wanted to attach it to the NDAA. That's why we haven't heard that, but we haven't considered that yet in the House. Now they want to attach it to a continuing resolution. In other words, in order to keep the government open, they have to pass the SAVE Act. So attach it to that before the end of September. And even if it did pass, which it's not going to, there's no time to implement it.
Yeah.
And it's going to impose huge cost on the states as well. There's a lot of other bad things in the SAVE Act, Flash, but the bottom line is it's intended to prevent people from voting so Republicans can win the midterm election.
Matt, how is this affecting just this whole conversation? I mean, you and I are talking about it. You hear a lot of this on cable news, especially. I'm just wondering, how is this affecting those who are trying to register to vote right now? Because they realize, things aren't very good in America right now, as far as gas prices, as far as, we got this war going on. But what are you hearing about that as far as registering to vote?
Fortunately, in our union, most of our members are registered to vote. We do the internal polling and all that, and we sign on to the larger AFL-CIO program of trying to, make sure particularly union members are registered to vote. So, but I think it depends on the state you live in, Flash, to be honest. Like, if you live in a state like Maryland, you can go register to vote and it won't have any problems. If you live in a state like Alabama, you're probably going to have a problem registering to vote. If you're just a normal citizen, and it's going to have an impact. I think particularly in some of these southern states, Georgia could be one, and Georgia's a battleground state. North Carolina is another one. But I think it really depends on what state you're in.
Matt Biggs is our featured guest on the show today. He is president of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, IFPTE.org. He was elected president in August of 2021 and then reelected in July of 2024. I want to talk about organizing. Liz Schuler, president of the AFL-CIO, wants at least 2 million more workers organized in the next 5 years. Let's talk about that next with Matt Biggs. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce. Don't go away.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org. The Heat and Frost Insulators and Allied Workers are proud to be a title sponsor for America's Workforce Radio. The Insulators Union is leading the way in the mechanical insulation industry, fire stopping, and infectious disease control. Regarded as North America's energy conservation specialists, these professionals are known for their professional work and dedication. You can learn more about the Insulators Union at insulators.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. Are you an experienced mechanical insulator looking to take your career to the next level? Insulators Local 50 in Central Ohio has steady work for a number of years. Insulators Local 50 offers a total wage and benefits package that can't be beat. It's not just the competitive wages. Local 50 also provides medical, vision, and dental insurance with no paycheck deductions for you and your family. Don't miss out on the chance to secure your future. Join us at Insulators Local 50. Earn great pay and the best benefits. Visit insulatorsfifty.com/AWF50 to fill out the online form, and a Local 50 representative will call to begin the process. This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
Now, Back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, it's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Also appreciate our sponsors. One of them is our featured guest today. That would be Matt Biggs, president of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, IFPTE.org. You can also go on Facebook at IFPTE. So you were at the AFL-CIO Constitutional Convention in June. I understand you were reelected to the executive board. Is that right?
Yes, reelected. Yeah, this is my, I came in midterm, so this really is my second full term, but third time around being on the executive council, and I'm honored to be on that council. It's the, outside of the convention, it's the labor movement's top governing body of the AFL-CIO.
Well, I don't know if it's the times we're living in right now, but from everyone that I talked to that went to that convention said, wow, there was a lot of energy. Liz Schuler was on fire, and she and Fred Redmond were reelected to their respective positions as president and secretary treasurer. And she came out swinging and said, you know what, we got to organize. And there's a lot of people that want to join unions. You know this, Matt. I think the number is like 50 million. There's like 50 million people in America right now that would love to be part of a union, but they know how difficult it is. I mean, you really gotta have a really thick skin to deal with the union busters, the captive audience meetings. I mean, I could get into all of that. I'm not going to, but the bottom line is this: we have to organize. We have to organize, and I understand you're doing just that. Talk to me about the fisheries unit in Hawaii. I love that. What's the story there?
Yeah, and federal employees, I will say, and there's no time like the present to organize and build our strength. And as labor unions, outside of representing our members, which is the priority, organizing is right there a close second. We have to build our strength. The more members we have, the stronger we are. So, yeah, we recently successfully organized a group of 200 workers in Hawaii. They work for NOAA, and they're part of the fisheries unit of NOAA. And they overwhelmingly voted for union representation with IFPTE. And that's just our latest organizing win. And it's important to point out, like I said, these are federal employees. These folks are under attack by this administration, and yet they stepped up to the plate and were brave enough to put their necks out there and organize. And we're getting, I'll tell you what, Flash, we don't have the resources to organize all these folks. So sometimes we have to refer people to different unions, but we're always getting hit up by new workers that want to organize, and we have to pick and choose the organizing campaigns that we're going to undertake just based on resources. But we're going to continue to organize. President Schuler and Secretary Treasurer Redmond, as you said, they put out the number 2 million over the next 5 years, and kudos to them. Much respect to them. They're great leaders of our movement, and IFPT is all about it. We're going to be right there helping to reach that 2 million number.
All right, Matt, you mentioned you're short on resources. What can we do to change that? What's the strategy moving forward here? If they want to join your union, they should be able to do it.
Every union has limited resources, right? So we have organizers, and they do a great job organizing. So right now, the request from workers to organize, as I said, is at an all-time high. Where we're organizing an employer, if a group comes to us and we don't have, organizers to help them organize, we will go to another union and say, hey, this union might be able to help you more. So, and it goes both ways. We hear from other unions that come to us and say, hey, this group would fit better in IFPTE than it would our union. So we're all coordinating. That's the beauty of being part of the AFL-CIO and the labor family. We all coordinate together on a lot of this organizing. But yeah, every worker needs a union. IFPT certainly firmly believes that. And if they can't fit in this union, they can fit in another union, and we're there to help. But yeah, you get more resources by organizing, Flash. Let's just be honest about it. The more members we have, the more resources we have. And along those lines, the laws in this country when it comes to union membership are draconian and unfair. And, right to work for less means we have to represent everybody and they don't have to necessarily pay the dues.
Yeah.
So part of the resources problem is we need to change the law so that everyone that's in a bargaining unit, contributes the union dues, contributes to that union.
Yeah. Well, like I said, there's 50 million people in America that would like to join a union, but there's a lot of roadblocks out there. I'm just wondering here, you've been involved in your union for a long time, and it seems to me, and I've had this conversation posed to a number of guests on the show, that, when workers are attacked, which they are and have been under this administration and the previous Trump administration, that's when they say enough is enough. Have you seen that? In your comments already, you've kind of answered this already, that, you've got a lot of people coming to you. And well, first of all, it's got to make you feel good, number one. And it seems to me, getting to that 2 million number that Liz Schuler brought up at the AFL-CIO convention, and Fred Redmond told me this, that's the floor. I mean, we could probably get 2, maybe we could probably get 3 million, maybe 4 million. What do you say to that?
Well, I'm going to make a prediction here, and I'm pretty confident we're going to fly right by that 2 million number. Brother Fred Redmond's right. That's the floor, not the ceiling. And we're going to well exceed 2 million members in organizing. Yeah, no, workers are thirsty, right? They're hungry for organizing. They want respect on the job. And the tide has turned in this country, and we can just see it based on the outreach. People come to us and want to organize, and these are workers that you wouldn't really think would want a union, like law firms. We're big in organizing law firms all across the country. So lawyers are anxious to organize and have a voice on the job and bargain collectively. And it's not always about money. It's not always about the pension. It's not always about the health care. It's about having a say in their careers and having a voice on the job and having power over their own careers. And that's what we're seeing. And it's not just IFPTE, it's all across the labor movement. I mean, when you talk to other unions, it's all across the labor movement and all across sectors. In the energy sector, for example, we have, we're organizing all throughout the energy sector, both here in the U.S. and in Canada, and we're proud to do that. And it's that the appetite is strong for organizing right now.
Well, when you organize some of those attorneys and they get their contract, we can hopefully use them to change labor law in this country, because we need to change that. We need to make it better. We want to get to that mark of 50 million people that want a union, should belong to a union. I'm going to leave it on that note. Our featured guest today, Matt Biggs, president of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. Do go to this website. A lot of good information posted there, IFPTE.org. And you can also check them out on Facebook. Take care. Stay safe. Stay in touch. Okay, brother?
Thanks, Flash. Appreciate you, man. You take care.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up tomorrow, the benefits of union work in California on public works projects. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.